Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to show you how you can create a chart in Excel to show a range of differences, and in this example I'm using two sets of investment returns going back to 1999, and so I want to be able to easily compare and contrast how they've done using a chart. I don't just want to plot their actual returns, I also want to show the gap to help emphasize when there's been a big difference and when there hasn't been. So I've got the returns listed here. I'm going to need to set up multiple additional fields to help plot this information correctly. The first field I'm going to create, I'm going to call starting. This is basically my starting value. So this will be a column chart that's blank. It's going to be the starting point of where I want my gap to begin. And so to set this up, I'm going to use an if function and an and function as well. So I'm going to check if both of these values are negative or not. So I'm going to say if they're less than 0. And if they're both negative, then what I'm going to want to do is pull the maximum value. And that's going to be the value closest to 0. Otherwise, I'm simply just going to get the smallest value. So if they're both positive, it's going to be the smallest value. And if they're negative, it's going to be the largest value, because the goal is to get the value that's closest to 0. Here we got 17%, so that's my starting value that I want to use. You can see I've got minus 9% here. Again, that's closest to 0. That's the value that I want. So this is pulling the correct starting values for my chart. The next thing that I need to factor in is if there's a crossover. So if there's a mix of negative and positive returns, then I need to factor in that I'm not just taking the difference between positive and negative values. There's going to be that effect of having two separate gaps, one for a crossover and one for the remaining difference. So I'm going to create another field here called crossover. And this is just going to be a simple check to say, you know, if these values are both both positive or both negative, and for that test, I'm just going to take these values, multiply them by one another, put them in parentheses, and say, okay, if they are greater than 0, meaning they have the same sign, then there is no crossover, so the value is going to be returned is 0. Otherwise, the value that I'm going to pull is the starting value. So basically, it's going to bridge that gap and it's going to represent the difference from the starting value to the 0 value. So if there isn't any mix of signs, then there's no crossover. Here we've got a mix from 0 to, I mean, this is technically not a mix, but it's still technically a different sign. Here we've got a mix. We've got a positive return and a negative, so it's taking that starting value there. So we've got our crossover amounts set up. The last field I'm going to create, I'm going to call just the difference. And how this is going to work is this is actually going to be the gap to fill in. So if there's a crossover, it's going to be the second gap, basically, because if there's a crossover, there's going to be two parts to that gap. But if they're both the same sign, then it's just going to be a simple max minus min calculation. So how this form is going to work is I'm going to use an if function again to say, okay, if this value in the crossover amount is not equal to 0, then what I'm going to do is simply take the maximum value between these two ranges, and that's basically going to be the second part of my gap. Now, if there isn't a crossover amount, then what I'm going to do is check to see if the value in D2, my starting value here, if that's positive, then what I know is they're both going to be positive values, in which case I can just take the maximum of these values and then deduct the lower value. And then if they aren't positive and they're negative, then I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to take the minimum value and then subtract the maximum value. Now, if this looks a bit confusing, I'll leave a link in the description to this video where you can follow along in the post related to this, and they'll have that formula set up for you. So I'm going to copy this down, and so now we've got the second part of that gap. So you can see here we've got a mix where there was a difference of minus 10% to plus 6%. So our starting value is going to be minus 10%. That crossover amount is going to be the same value, and then the rest of that difference is going to be that 6.63%, which is from that zero amount. So combined, they're going to create one large gap. So, and that's the next part of this, is actually setting up the chart. So with a cell selected on my data set, I can go to the Insert tab, click on this button to open up all the charts, go to the All Charts tab, under Combo. Since I'm using a mixture of charts, I need to use Combo here. Now I've got the year listed as a series. I'm going to get rid of that. But for now, what I'm going to do is just set up a chart type for each one of my values. So for the actual returns, I'm going to use just a simple line chart with markers. And then for the gaps, I'm going to use the stack column, because we're going to stack these on top of one another. And now I'm going to hit OK. And so initially this chart looks all wrong. I'm going to right click, select data, and I'm going to remove that year series, which is selected first. Remove it. I also need to fix the horizontal axis. As you can see, I've got a series starting from 1. That's not what I want. That's where I actually want the years. So I'm going to click on Edit and select these years. And Excel is going to detect that for these line values, that's what I want. I also have to do this for the columns. So I'm going to click on Edit again and select the year. And Excel is going to apply that same horizontal category to the remaining series. So now that I've got that set up, it starts to look a bit better, but I still need a lot of work here. So for the lines, what I'm going to do is right click on any one of them, Format Data Series, and under the Fill bucket, there's an option to select No Lines. So I've just got the data point. I can do the same thing for the green one as well. Select No Line, and that's looking a bit cleaner. For my starting value, this column, this is going to be empty. This is my starting value. So I'm going to set the fill to be no fill, so it basically disappears. Now for the other ones, for the crossover, I'm going to select solid fill, and I'm going to use just a gray highlight here, and the same for the difference, because I don't want these to look different. I'm going to use solid fill again, select that gray value. So there's still some issues here. These gaps aren't in the right places, and to fix that, I'm going to format the series one more time. Actually select the data, and what I'm going to do is move this crossover amount up top, or higher than the starting amount. And basically that ensures that the stacking order is correct, so that starting value is in the right place. So now that I've got that set up, you can see I've got those gaps. Now what I'll want to do is also move these data labels down. And so again, if I format this axis, right click Format Axis, under the Labels section, I'll select Low. And so now it's a bit cleaner to look at. Now, I also don't want to show these legends. I don't want to see all my helper fields that I set up. So I'm going to delete the crossover, delete the starting amount, and delete the difference. So the easiest way to do that, just click on the legend and select it from there. So as you can see, now we've got a chart that shows that. So I'd keep the legend for these values, because that's going to be useful, because we're not always going to have the same one on top as the one on the bottom. So it's a lot easier now to visually see these ranges. And so even when there's this crossover amount, as you can see over here, it looks like one solid continuation, one solid block of gap. And that's why, by having that crossover field as well as the difference together, they can take care of those situations where you've got a positive and negative value, and you want to bridge that entire difference between those two values. So at this point, all that would really be left to do is really just apply a title. So if I just put the name of the two series and apply any additional formatting or colors that you may want to set up if you want to use different colors. But that's how we can set up a chart that shows these ranges, so we get a whole lot more information into our chart. Not only do we see the actual returns, but we can see the difference in the gaps, and we can easily highlight where there's been big differences and then when there have been small differences. Now, if we want to flip this series around, I can format this axis and put the categories in reverse order. So if I check this off, now we've got the years going in the opposite order. So again, depending on your preferences, you may still want to do some more tweaks, but that's how we can set this up to show multiple ranges and data points in one single chart. So if you did like this video, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.